Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. Today, topic experts will share strategies that agencies can implement to alleviate the concern of the unknown and make operations more efficient. My name is Kirsten Patton, the Working Group Program Manager here at ATARC, and I'll be moderating today's panel discussion. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and we are a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to welcome all of our attendees and a special thanks to Stacy Giancura, Bill Bensing, and the rest of the Red Hat team. This afternoon, the plan is to hear from our panelists, followed by a Q&A where we will pop in a few polls and answer your questions. Before we begin, I just want to encourage you to submit those questions in the Q&A section of this platform at the bottom of your screen. And also remember to answer the polls as they come up throughout the discussion to ensure that you receive your CPE credits. That being said, if our panelists could please come on camera and unmute yourselves, we're going to do a round of introductions. Let's start with you first, Ian.
All right, thank you. My name is Ian Anderson, and I'm a lead DevSecOps engineer with Naval Surface Warfare Center Dalton at their Dam Neck activity in Virginia Beach. So currently what I do recently was just the acting technical lead for the new enterprise software factory or tools offering for NSWC Dahlgren. Have now transitioned to a department that is providing support for the cloud offerings for Microsoft Azure GovCloud and AWS GovCloud. So continuing to support the groups at the enterprise level at Dahlgren with DevOps and DevSecOps best practices. So what makes where I work very unique, especially when it comes to bringing these best practices, especially around security and compliance, is that we're a working capital fund. So, we only get enough money to keep the lights on and to say we have a building somewhere. So all of our money really comes in from the projects that we're able to bring in. So, we get this environment of, we have some teams doing, the best practices, they have automation, they have, all the great things that you would want to see. And then you have other groups who, are asking questions like, what is Git? What is a container? What is Kubernetes? So, we have everything on the spectrum from, wow, this group really needs help, to, wow, this group is, doing great things, we can learn from them. So it becomes very interesting when we want to start implementing these best practices or really put policy in place to say, you need to do this. How can we do that where we really help those teams that need it, but not hinder those teams that are already doing great things and want to do more? So that's kind of the unique space that I'm currently in.
That's great. Well, it's good to have you back, and I'm happy that you're not sick of us yet, since you've been so involved this week with GuideTech and the working group. So good to see you again. All right, let's hear from Matthew next.
Yes, good morning. My name is Matthew Houston. I am the CIO and CISO for Platform One. What makes our environment unique is that we are focusing on innovation and trying to see what it is that we can not only bring into the software factory model, but also how we can write it into policy and make it something that's repeatable. One of our primary mission objectives is to automate the stand-up of platforms that software factories can use as a foundation to really get them into the game, and then being able to have those partnerships where we can feed off of each other and really make a sense of community as we move forward. I interact a lot with the Air Force CIO and the AOs within the Air Force to try to establish the policy, and then with the DoD CIO office to try to write that into DoD policy. A lot of the work that we have currently ongoing is indeed the CATO policy coming out of the CIO office, and I've been providing a lot of feedback on trying to make sure that the different use cases that we have from the factory perspective is taken into account as more of these software factories are created.
Great, thank you, Matthew. Awesome to have you here. And then Bill, over to you.
Hey everybody, Bill Bensing out of Red Hat, software factory lead. A little bit similar to what Matthew's talking about, but my specialization right now is continuous authorization, also referred to as automated governance, and a new talk track called modern governance. So the idea is between commit to production, what can you do to pull everybody's hands out of the process and still achieve a 100% compliant and highly secure deployment to a deployment target. So that's a bit about me.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll go ahead and start things off with our first poll question of the day. If our event coordinator could please get that posted. There we go. Does your team cooperatively design software with your compliance or audit teams before the software is built? So folks at home, please answer that. We'll just do that sort of as a warm-up exercise to get folks thinking. But now I'll turn it over to you, Ian, and ask somewhat of a similar question. Have you considered compliance, security, and audit as part of your DevOps processes?
Yes, we definitely have. Being a naval warfare center, a lot of the projects, we have some very old projects such as Aegis, Tomahawk, SLBM, and those are things that are going to go on to the ship. So when you talk about compliance and security and making sure everything is tested and retested, it definitely is something that has to go into the process. So when you talk about these new things of, automation and, really shifting everything left to the developer, that the security team and compliance team was one of the, first teams that we brought in to say, hey, how can we do this? And how can we make it better? What are some of the pain points that you all have? A lot of the DevOps and DevSecOps process, you really think, oh, let's just focus on the developer, but you also have to see, where are the pain points for, your other teams as well. And the big one is your developers and your team or project will produce all of this software, and at the end of the line, the security and compliance people finally get in and go, yeah, this just isn't going to work. You'll have to rework all of this stuff. So working with them, not only at the level of, what do you want to see from the products coming out of a software factory or what these teams are producing, how do we bake that compliance into, our tools and, our platform that we're providing to these teams. So that way it's, not only the product's compliant, but, what the product is going through in the processes as, Bill has said, how can we get the people's hands out of the process, allow it to be more automated so we can start pushing our products through faster?
Thank you, Ian. And Matthew, how does Platform One approach compliance, security, and audit as part of your DevOps processes?
Sure. So 5 years ago, whenever we were standing up the first Air Force continuous ATO, that was the initial focal point, right? We built out our DevSecOps environment with that as the focus. So my background, I was a software developer within the Air Force, and I was familiar with all of the compliance and the regulations that we had to go through. So we started just trying to really automate that. Today, what we're doing within Platform One is that we have a container that can look at and audit our entire Kubernetes environment to allow us to be able to generate a lot of the compliance validations. So looking into different RMF controls and the 800-171, to make sure that the environment hasn't changed, hasn't drifted since it was initially deployed, and is in compliance with our regulations and our policies. As we continue to grow out our policies in general, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that's coming through to try to update our policies to reflect some of these software factories. And then from the application perspective, quite frankly, the pipelines that we develop are centered around an assess-only package for specific applications, so we can ensure that they're meeting the intent of a lot of those policies, with the developers not ever really having to focus in on responding to those questions. We do have a survey that goes on to maps up a lot of engineering questions to the various different controls, but for the most part, it allows the developers and the engineers to just be hands off and the security still being taken into consideration.
Certainly, thank you. And Bill, coming from the industry side, what do you advise when considering, again, compliance, security, and audit as part of DevOps best practices?
I always like to take, when you think about the compliance, security, audit, and governance, I take an SRE view about it. So site reliability engineering, the concept there, Ben Turner-Soft, is take a software engineering approach to infrastructure. That's how SRE came out, was at 2003. The idea around some of the governance is taking that software engineering approach as well. Most people look at and call it CI/CD, their software delivery, however they want to refer to it. They look at it as a series of tools and integrations. And it's easiest to say when I ask somebody like, what's your approach to software delivery? It's Git to Jenkins, whatever it may be. That's actually a bad way of looking at it. It needs to be elevated up to more of a business architecture. What it is if you look at software delivery, it is a business process. So it needs to be treated as a business process, abstracted away from underlying technology. So you can make sure you're achieving what your business needs, goals, and policies are. When you start looking at it, then you can start bringing in other concerns that are outside just developer and operations, compliance, security, audit, governance. And that's when you can start getting in and identifying how do we pull hands off. One thing we do talk to people is it is a bit of a mind change. There's actually a really good book called The Goal, written by Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt. He has I guess we'd call it an audiobook, but back in the 90s when they recorded it, I don't think it was an audiobook, but a series of lectures called Beyond the Goal. And he talks about when you adopt technology, you have to drop your old rules and adopt new rules. So as we go into these concepts of automated governance and continuous authorization, these new rules are taking your compliance and audit folks and not having them being the people in the middle reviewing material and artifacts, but having them contributing things such as compliance as code, policy as code, whatever it may be, codifying the expectations. And so as we start thinking, and from a broader industry perspective, how can you do this in highly regulated industries? It is bringing that software engineering approach back and saying, okay, we've got these people in the middle, they're cogs in a wheel, but they're extremely value added because they have insights and understandings around compliance, security, audit, and other governance aspects. So where do we best fit them in? What are our new rules? And how do we then, build a trusted system that can then automate and get from hands off or commit to a deployment target as effectively as possible?
Thank you for sharing your perspectives on that. So my next question is going to be a thumbs up yes or a thumbs down no. And the question is, do your organizations engage in cooperative software design with your compliance, security, and audit teammates? So thumbs up if that is the case, thumbs down if that is not the case. From our panelists.
Oh, from us? Oh, yeah.
Sorry, wasn't clear.
I was looking for a thumbs up somewhere on the screen. I'm like, there's a thumbs up thing now.
Yeah. Okay, so thumbs up, that means yes. So my question then for each of you will go around Robin again. If so, how do you structure this type of collaboration? And please elaborate upon what has been the pain points experienced at first with this type of collaboration, as well as what have you done to smooth over those pain points. So we'll start with Ian again, please.
Yes. So, for us, it is it is an attempt to be collaborative. We want to, have the security compliance, all that in there. What we've found is that, with, all these various projects going on, some that need more of the, rigorous security and compliance because, they're going to a certain part of the ship, whereas others, are whether it be O&R projects or little, kind of innovation projects that, really are testing things out. So, we really don't have dedicated for each, project, a dedicated security or compliance person. A lot of this collaboration is coming from, at the department level with our, IT admins or, the security department that's, watching over, really the whole department. So, one of the interesting things is when we go to do things, where you want to actually bake in the security, actually, put these things into code to get that automation. A lot of times these, security and compliance people aren't coders. They know the process. They know how to look over the documents or, maybe implement them on a server. But, they really don't have that expertise to sit down and go, let's code this up so we can get this automated. So, it's kind of, right now for us really working with, those groups to say, hey, can we get some of your time to sit down, you explain to us, in the context of the project, what are the things that you want to see? And, we can kind of explain to you how we can automate these things. And, it's kind of that back and forth of, we have the expertise to get it automated. You have the expertise of, what is it that we need to automate when it comes to security, compliance, and all that. And that's really, where our collaboration is kind of lying right now. Like I said, the bigger projects may have their security person or compliance person because, it's a larger project. They've been there for a while. They need it. While, most projects are relying on that department level, very general, broad perspective of what security and compliance, means, at the department level, not necessarily at the project level.
Thank you, Ian. And Matthew, I'll call on you next to please share your experience with this as well.
Absolutely. So the compliance and the audit personnel have always been at the forefront, but I will say that I have experienced a large amount of pain points similar to what Ian was just describing. We started out with a pipeline whenever we started trying to push out these factory environments, push out mission applications through a process to try to expedite the authorizations. The problem is that, we started with the MVP and we focused on what the pressing need was at that moment. Now, as we progressed and we kind of shifted our mindset on, what we were trying to deliver, we want to push out a platform that is able to meet a lot of those different situations, such as, the hardware and the loop testing, instead of just, web-based applications. And how are you going to automate something that has those type of connections? How are you going to produce the emulations? So, it started getting to the point where the engineers wanted to do engineering things, right? They wanted to push out feature sets and not necessarily work with the IA side of the house to be able to put the policy around it and to be able to ensure that you're meeting compliance with a number of, different policies that we have to meet. So that was definitely a pain point, and that was where we started to drift. And then because you're getting this momentum, there's a balance between, how fast you're moving forward, but how much you're actually documenting, so that way you can keep everybody on the same page. What we've done is we've taken a lot of my cyber individuals. So like I said, I'm on the CIO side, but I'm also the CISO. So I have a team of cyber policy folks that I have embedded a body within the different value streams. And now they're actually providing that input into the backlog and then pairing with the engineers. So they'll bring in, the various different control types and say, okay, well, we have to do the encryption of data in transit. How are we satisfying that? And how can we automate that validation of that particular control? So we brought in some other tooling, like OSCAL and stuff to try to really be able to interrogate our environment and then just bring the documentation to an automated point, but without having to, just manually validate every little piece. So I think that the solution is really just to try to get the engineers and the policy folks, the IA folks, the audit folks, just really sitting together and being on that same page. And it does take a special type of talent, of skill set, for you to be able to, talk the IA language and be able to translate that to engineering speak, because the two naturally just cannot communicate together.
Certainly. And then before we jump into audience questions, because I see a little bit of activity in the chat, Bill, I just want to open it up to you as well. Was there anything you would like to add to the conversation that hasn't already been stated?
Yeah, actually, I want to share a link to everybody. So I like where Matt was going with this, and Matthew and you were talking about close collaboration and the ability to cross some of those boundaries. 2019 IT Revolution published a paper. It was a thought paper on automated governance reference architecture. The concept here is actually, when I see this, it's a good way of sitting down across the board, looking at what I refer to as IORCA, so inputs and outputs of a software delivery process, actors and actions, risks and controls. Being able to sit down and start with that first and saying, okay, how are we governing these specific components of our software delivery process, and then extending that out to some specific technology implementation. I mean, I was talking about OSCAL. I think I heard OSCAP there, some of those specific tools and also those ontologies, because those are sort of an N+1 thing. Those are multiple ways to do that. You can have OSCAP, or you can have another policy tool like OPA. At the end of the day, they just compare two files and say, do these match or do they not? That's oversimplified, but that's ultimately what it does. So I think once you start looking at that and start designing your system from those perspectives, that way you can bring people together and start talking, because you do have to start elevating conversations and gearing it towards what is happening. And from an audit perspective and governance, helping engineers understand what it means, what some of these controls mean. And then at the end of the day, I think the epitome of this, and we've seen this in a couple of places, is then you'll start to have engineers actually contributing back to compliance as code or policy as code. And that's right there is where you epitomize automated governance or continuous authorization, is when the folks with the most context of your application, which are the software engineers, start contributing back to the governance, more controls, different controls, tighter controls, and other aspects such as that.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll take a quick pause. If we could please post our second poll question to wrap up this discussion. Go ahead and answer. Does your team cooperate, design software with your security teams before the software is built? Go ahead and answer yes, no, or you don't know. And then going back to the audience questions, Bill, I'll actually call on you first for this one, because you had a response to Patience's question about what we were discussing previously, if we should be referring to it as DevSecOps, DSCAO for short. Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, this is funny, probably coming from somebody in industry, but like when I hear that, all I think about is architecture. It's just another way to wrangle somebody in who has a checkbook. DevSecOps actually came out, was it Shannon Leeds 2015-ish? It was Shannon Leeds, she runs DevOps at Intuit, and came together with, the concept of security and not shift left security, but she first started talking about that. And then of course, industry has run off with it. Now everything's DevSecOps, especially since the software supply chain. I think it's interesting to look at after SolarWinds, who wasn't talking about software supply chain, and now how their tool is now a software supply chain tool. But so I say no, DevOps, so you get back to sort of the epitome of DevOps. And I think back to like Andrew Clay Schaefer and some of those, the Velocity conference back like 2009-ish timeframe. You have that wall of confusion. You have Dev on one side and Ops. You have a core chronic conflict. Dev wants to move fast. Ops wants to be stable, move slow. So how do you resolve that, right? Start looking at that, putting those walls up and adding other people in there, compliance, security, audit, and other stakeholders in the process, especially in the DoD and other highly regulated industries. So the proliferation of terms does nobody any good, in my opinion. You're just extending now your process, and what you need to start considering is looking at the DevOps ideas around the calms basis, and saying, okay, what other stakeholders are in here? What other core chronic conflicts do we have? And how do we systemically resolve these and come up with a solution where we have effective delivery, where we do meet our requirements 100% of the time, but also getting down to efficient delivery after that, because it's pretty hard to be efficient before you can be effective. So yeah, there's my term. I think keep it DevOps. It's easier. I always like my little antenna goes up when I start seeing proliferations of the term, and then somebody trying to justify it. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Bill. And then our other two panelists, Matthew or Ian, what are some of your thoughts around that question?
I mean, I'm with Bill 100%. In my mind, DevOps was by nature supposed to encompass all of those different elements. The problem that we had is that as we were actually getting through to try to implement a lot of those, it was indeed driven by engineers who were focused on feature sets. And I think that security did get dropped along the way. So, there's really, I don't think there's any difference between now calling it DevSecOps and what it was the intent previously with DevOps, but it is a way to re-energize and focus the security aspect on it and really bring it in. Again, I've always put security in DevOps, so I think it's a little bit redundant, but it is a way to make sure that people are bringing that in. And I think that auditing and the compliance and everything is part of security. So I think that it's all encompassed within DevSecOps. And please let's not create yet another term.
Good points. Ian, do you agree as well?
Yes, I 100% agree that, it's kind of, if you think back or, TV shows and things show it of the law firm and whose name's going to come first on it. I see it like that, at the end of the day, we're providing a service, we're providing, what we're here to do out to, our stakeholders, our community. It doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it, DevSecOps, SecDevOps, DevNet, Sec, whatever you want to fill in the middle. But at the end of the day, like both Bill and Matt said, it all should be encompassed in there. And, the way I take it is if somebody comes to me and says, hey, we haven't considered this, or, this is something new that I don't think you have in your pipeline or, in your considerations or your plan, always, that's what you want to do. Bring your whole team in, listen to them and find out, is it something that we may have overlooked?
Excellent. Well, thank you. Patience wanted to note that she was joking, and I think that's really funny because I thought it was serious, but it's true. There are so many acronyms out there, but great comment. And if you want to follow up, please utilize the chat and continue to do so. So moving on to the next audience question. Rich says that his agency is having problems getting DevOps, I can't speak. Okay, DevOps CI/CD, which is continuous integration, continuous deployment changes to their product, systems into our change management process. Auditors will be asking, where are the CCB requests for changes to these productions systems? And how do you integrate DevOps into the traditional CCB process? So panelists, please mull that over. And if you have any insights you could share around the problem that Rich is facing, go ahead and unmute yourselves and share your wisdom with us.
So I'm happy to jump right in on this. I think that the main concern that I have is that you're trying to take a more modern approach to a legacy process. So that CCB, it by nature was designed to hold in a list of backlog items that exist for multiple years that would get voted on and then brought into a production system. And I think that our mindset around that, especially as we try to bring in more modern development, it needs to change. Instead of having, a requirement that is coming out from 3 years ago, we need to focus on what the pain point is now, what the warfighter needs, or whatever the customer needs, the mission owner, and really just focus on a backlog that is much shorter. And maybe you're looking at a 12-month or a 3-month, just being able to prioritize those particular items and then just constantly be reviewing them. And if they no longer exist, if the requirement is no longer there, then let's get rid of it, right? Let's not keep it within a tracking system, and then let's try to just move on from it.
Excellent points. Thank you. Ian or Bill, would you like to add anything before we continue?
Go for it, Ian. What you got? What's your thoughts?
Yes, we have, a similar thing that goes on at Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren, where, a lot, especially with the older, larger systems where they, you'll come in and say, hey, we should, think about automation, really take a look at it. And then, the question pops up of, okay, well, how is the, change control board going to, factor into this? And it's it kind of goes against what you want to do of, we want to automate, we want to go faster, but now you want to put this roadblock in front of us of, people who want to manually review what changes that you want. For us, it is still an issue. A lot of people still stuck in their ways. So, I don't have a great answer on how to solve it, especially with, a lot of the older systems. So, I'm open for anything as well.
All right, Bill, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I say, get rid of your change approval board. The first way is get rid of it. But the thing though about getting rid of the board is the reason it's there is what needs to be automated and understood. When I talk about your business architecture, the change process is important. It captures, it documents, it ensures policy is being adhered to. You can do that from an automated perspective. One story I like to tell is I'm actually writing a book about this, hopefully come out from IT Revolution and around August timeframe. But one of our co-authors is Topo Powell. Topo ran DevOps at Capital One, and there's a story out there you can find it on the net. But basically, what he did is he set up two processes. He had the traditional process for the apps where you go through a change approval board, but then he had this other process that had 16, I think it was 16 tenets to it. But the idea is with security, compliance, operations, dev all work together to define what an automated change of process looks like. And then what happened is they would implement that. And so they gave the organization two options. You can go through the change approval board the traditional way if you want to, or you can go through this automated perspective. But to do this, you have to collaborate. You have to meet these 16 points. And I believe it was 16, whatever that specific number was. And so as you start going through, those are analogies out there to start looking at how you can do that type of change management. So I would argue that get rid of the change approval board, but don't get rid of the concept of change management in a change process. The concept's important because of what it represents in a business process. But then when you start asking yourself and you start taking an engineering perspective, what can I start to do to remove the folks out of this process and start to replace them with levels of technology to ensure you have trust? Because what I would argue is people in the loop, they actually don't make any more secure and compliant. They'll make you less secure and compliant because, for example, if you miss your coffee one day, are you always going to give the same result? Given the same evidence, the same set of controls, are you going to give the same audit outcome? The answer is no. And so that's how I look at that. But yeah, I'll stop right there. I can keep going on and on about this one. I'm passionate about my dissatisfaction for the concept of change approval boards. I like the board itself. I like the change approval process though.
I think Matthew agrees with you. I see another audience question came through. So around DevSecOps, what in your opinion will be the key qualifiers for new software security solutions in 2022? Perhaps code level monitoring?
I think that code level monitoring is something that we do today. It depends on what aspect that you're looking at. So from the entire ecosystem that we set up within Platform One for DevSecOps, if we're looking at COTS-based products, so commercial off the shelf, so stuff that you get from an external vendor, they're not going to necessarily offer up their actual source code. So having code level monitoring at that point is going to be something that's very difficult to do. However, I foresee that in this next calendar year, we are going to be focusing a lot more on supply chain. So I think it was Bill brought up earlier, or maybe it was Ian, the SolarWinds concern and the issue, and being able to have some of the background information on specific authors of various different code products. I think that's going to be a focus, and potentially generating of risk scores, just so that way we can get an idea if there is something that should be a caution or at what level, in the similar manner that we do CVEs for various vulnerabilities that exist within a product or within a library, within a dependency. I foresee us looking at the individuals that are committing and authoring code to be in a similar vein to even the vendor perspective.
Great. A good question. Any other panelists want to share?
Go ahead, Ian. I'll follow back to you.
All right. Yeah, recently, I met with a group that was actually taking a look at, how can you track the network traffic of, an application or, whatever you're producing. So, you have your what they call the golden image or your golden application. It works correct. It's, users are logging in, it's sending stuff over the network. And then you have a new build, if there's a malicious package or something in there that you may not know about, and it wants to, whether it be send out data or send incorrect data through the network, to be able to identify, from your golden image to this new release, is it, what's expected to come through the network? So having the ability to, have your users interact with your application or your site and being able to replay that network traffic onto a new build or onto, something that you want to put out into production, and just to make sure that, okay, with the same network traffic and the same things that are happening, we're getting the expected responses. And obviously with new builds, there may be a change in the network traffic, having the ability to identify and say, yep, no, that's an expected change. And this kind of goes to help, a lot of those unknowns, pretty much the ones that you don't know are there. So, helping catch those things that get into production that, may not be flagged already, that, if they get activated or whatever it may be, and you can catch those, that malicious activity before you really put it into production or with, sensitive data, whatever it may be.
Thank you. And then Bill, did you want to follow up?
I like what they both say. What if I, because I'm always gonna say something that's, I won't say contrarian, but when I say something, I see these guys shaking head, I'm like, okay, it's not that contrarian. But I don't believe security is going to come from the tools you buy. And I believe that if you're going to try to buy tools for security, you're looking at it the wrong way. I was speaking with John Willis the other day. John Willis is the author or co-author of the DevOps Handbook, co-author of the DevOps Handbook. And it was interesting. He's like, yeah, you go talk to a big digital companies like Google or whatnot. You give them $1 for investment. They take 90 cents of it and they invest it in the people, and 10 cents and invest it in the tool. You give a non-digital native, let's just call the rest of the industry $1, they spend 90 cents on tools and 10 cents on people. Security flaws are just how your code's written. I think Matt was hinting at this, right? So security practices start with the engineers and good engineering development practices. There's a big difference, in my opinion, between an engineer and a mechanic. Ask yourself, are what you refer to the people building your software, the mechanics, they really know how to use a good tool? It's called Java, it's called Angular, it's called React. They just know how to get an outcome with a tool, or can they think through the situations and understand how to engineer the software so you have true deterministic outcomes? You should know every outcome, and every outcome for your piece of software should be planned. I think about the log4j shell thing that's happening right now. People are going and updating their WAF. Why is an endpoint being exposed /test if that's not actually part of your specific requirement? So, there's questions around there. So it's getting down to engineering practices and then going back from there. Now, you do have dynamic testing tools that you can use as a way to validate that certain attack vectors are, that you can't be exposed by certain attack vectors. And I encourage that, but then I go back up to your business process. When you think about security is different than compliance. What are the ways that you have to be secure? How can you define that in a way that's not tool specific? And then can you go and buy a tool that may be more economically feasible than building and rolling your own internally? And that's when you look at the buy versus build situation of a tool. But if you start with a tool first, you may be asking the wrong question.
Great, thank you. Great insights and great audience questions. So please keep them coming. But that being said, we'll pop up our third and final poll question, or second to final poll question, similar to the one we just did. We can get that up on our screen. There we are. If you are not cooperating with your compliance, security, and audit teams for software design, please select Y. And I'll turn it back over to my questions for our panelists. Ian, we'll start with you again. How would you go about executing a mandate that states that you must automate the auditing process for our software development lifecycle? Would you be able to talk us through that?
Yes, for us, we recently kind of went through, these policy changes. Luckily, at the time as COVID-19 came about, our 5-year strategic plan for NSWC Dahlgren had just expired. So, redoing our 5-year strategic plan and, really, what is that, the really strategic thrusts that we wanted to do for the next 5 years. And luckily, that was going towards, a better software development lifecycle for the entire enterprise. How can we get everybody to come together and, not be as siloed, collaborate more, and, get more of that automation. And one of those things being the security and compliance, and how do we really, what we call, put that technical rigor into all of our projects. So when it came to how do we essentially mandate that you will have in your CI/CDs an automated security compliance, something in there, we didn't really want to go, you need to use this tool, or you need to do these things. It was a more we took the approach of, please tell us how you're doing this. Describe to us, what is your process? In that way, like I said, we have teams that, probably really aren't doing it. And then you have teams who probably already have it fully automated. So by having them, and, we didn't want to make it like, to the point of, well, if you don't have this, we're going to be very angry with you. We wanted them to be very open about it. Describe to us how you're doing this, and if you're not, let us get you that help to actually start automating the process in there. Or they describe it to you, and you can make suggestions for improving it, or even learn the opposite way. Go, wow, they're really doing something unique here, or they're doing something that we didn't think about. Let's see if we can now collaborate with other projects and other teams to get this pushed out across the Warfare Center. And that's kind of the approach that we took to, when pushing these new practices or leading best practices for DevOps and DevSecOps.
Thank you, Ian. And Matthew, I'll turn the same question over to you.
Sure, no, absolutely. And by no means do we enjoy going through a manual process to validate our environments. So as we were really taking this DevSecOps movement that, started with, the really getting Kessel Run out in the forefront, and then just everybody catching wind of what's going on, a bunch of different software factories started jumping up. I've been fortunate enough to be involved, during a lot of this growth and a lot of this time. And frequently what we would do is we would have what we refer to as campfires, where we would bring in representatives from a bunch of different software factories, a bunch of different locations. And we would be able just to sit back and, propose problems, and then see what type of solutions exist, or how others felt about the situation, to include automating these type of compliance validations. We had a number of software factories that were coming from the old legacy way of doing authorizations, and they had to meet these certain requirements, where Kessel Run, the Space Camp, Platform One, like we were on the innovative side, where we were given some leeway, and we were creating environments from scratch. So we started trying to say, okay, well, what do we actually care about? What do we need to check? You're not going to be able to automate every check for an authorization, because some of them are business type processes that you need to have in place that just aren't going to be a technical solution for. But for those that did have it, then we started looking at, okay, these are the controls that we want to try to automate. This is what we know we can do. And then once we had our problem set, to Bill's point, then we started saying, okay, what technologies can we use? We do have a container called the Cluster Auditor, which utilizes OPA Gatekeeper to go in there and look at OPA policies, to go in and validate that our clusters are running under certain conditions. We use OSCAL, we use OSCAP. There's a number of different technologies, not centered just on one, that we kind of bring together to try to help to expedite that. But we didn't do it solely as Platform One, right? We reached out to the community, and anytime I'm talking to any of our mission owners, I always refer to us as partners. There's no way that one individual, one organization is going to have every answer for everybody. So utilize your community, right? Pose the question out to those that you're working with, and try to take that constructive criticism and the feedback to really build out a better solution. I also like to tell people that I don't have that organizational reliance within Platform One. I want to make sure that we're moving forward together as the federal government, and just really trying to push the bar on where we want to get. So if it's a conversation that just needs to be had, then by all means I will jump in there and try to see what I can do to help, or if I can bring in my a person I know over on mobile development, right? If somebody's doing mobile applications, bring them in and see how they're meeting the compliance discussion and how they're auditing their applications, right? So really just trying to utilize our networks.
Thank you. Yeah, excellent advice. And Bill, from your industry standpoint, what would you advise?
It sounds like it. What everybody's doing is sort of closer to advice. I use some big words like the scope economy, the concepts of recommenting and getting onto platforms. So the idea is convergence. So between processes and tools, you want to converge on a standard, and that's actually where the concept of reciprocity comes from, right? If we can agree to something, then everybody else can use it. Ask yourself across different missions, like, why are we using all these different tools, these different approaches? Everybody likes to think that it's unique for them, but regardless, C++, Java, you name your technology, let's even go back to Fortran. Most likely 99% of it's pretty standard. I mean, that's the whole concepts behind SRE, right? And so if you start focusing organization, if you think of like sort of a 3-layer cake: infrastructure, platform, and application services, application services is really where people want to be spending most of their time and their effort. Frankly, they're not, because they're spending too much time in the platform and the infrastructure side. So where can you bring about not just infrastructure services, but common infrastructure? Get down to things like almost getting down to the exact same hardware in your data centers, and then getting down to platform services and having teams that build out platform capabilities. So if it's something similar to Platform One, other types of software factories, or maybe there's just one model of a software factory that everybody uses. Because I won't use any specific names of tools right now, but ask yourself, between the 5 or 6 different static code analysis tools, what is really the difference when I'm going through looking for certain aspects of it? Why can't you converge on standards at that point in time? This is where you get your business. And then once you take care of that, now you can focus on, you can ensure reciprocity through those 2 subsequent layers, so that people can start focusing on their app systems. And then when you want to start talking about where the compliance and other aspects, you've already taken care of the 2 lower parts of the cake, and you can now focus and you reduce your scope and your effort just specifically on those. So it is taking that mindset, and it's, if you're building mission software, if you're building anything, you don't want to host your own infrastructure. You don't want to do your own platform services. You should expect those. That's actually, like, you think like Netflix, that's how it works. I was talking with Andrew Clay Schaefer the other day. He said, it's one of those things at Netflix is like, you can build anything you want at Netflix as long as you build it in Java. And so as you start getting down to those types of things and paved paths, that's where you're actually going to, that's a precursor to building in these compliant and approaches. Because you want to go build a new tech, that's fine. Either you have to support it or you have to go through the whole arduous process. But let's get you on a paved path where everything you do, you just do here, and you can build anything you want. So that's a bit how I look at going into that. It's convergence, reducing possibility and probability, because at the end of the day, risk is just probability and variance. If you can be more deterministic and reduce that, then and give that as reciprocity back to the rest of the organization, the community, wherever it may be. Now you're building a good solid foundation for compliance and security.
Well, thank you. Thank you for those insights. We have one other audience question just come through. What can you share with us about how the government is doing right now with the budget and reorganizing with post-COVID, with budgeting for the citizens? So basically, from your perspective within the government, how do you feel that it's working out at this point?
All right, so I can try to brave this answer. Let me start out by saying, by no means am I an acquisition expert, nor am I directly holding any kind of purse strings. But I will say that a lot of the work that we have been doing, is with the budget in mind, right? The whole drive behind a lot of these software factories is trying to reduce costs and to be able to really put the money where it matters the most. The continuing resolution has caused a lot of discussions to come up, but what I've seen in reality is that we are still able to execute our mission and still able to push forward on the innovation that we're trying to really get to, and really just trying to continue to move that ball forward. I will say that post-COVID, there are a lot of positives that have came out of the forced telework kind of situations, to the point where we are adopting VTCs a lot more often, as you can see even in this discussion here, and the government as a whole is being a lot more lenient on being able to reach individuals where they exist, where the subject matter experts are, and then being able to figure out a way that we can really bring them into the government. So we are able able to get a hold of better quality individuals and just really broaden the pool of contractors, of government employees that we're able to bring into the fold.
Thank you. And Ian, did you have a take on that question?
Yes, just real quick, from a working capital fund perspective, it really doesn't change too much with us. As I said, the money we get from the government is, only to keep the lights on. All of our money comes in from program offices and different things as it comes in with the projects. I do know, some of the things that, Navy as a whole is really looking at is, how do we consolidate a lot of our, cloud services, our, cloud brokers, and, reduce those, service fees and those costs associated, so we can get, the projects to move towards cloud and these platform offerings so that they don't have to worry about those things. And with that, one of the other things that we are looking at, for the Navy as a whole is how do we really start doing the, other transactional authorities better? How do we do these, get small businesses in and, move away from, just solely being these very large corporations? How do we start bringing in these small businesses and, really kind of opening it up to everybody to, see if we can get better solutions, whether it be a reduced cost or with somebody who really hasn't, done a lot with government contracting.
Thank you, guys. So 10 minutes left of our discussion. If anyone in the audience has any pressing questions, please send them in now before we run out of time. And I see we have another one. Patience wants to know, how much does the cybersecurity EO affect how you're thinking about DevOps? Are there any changes in processes or procedures based off of the executive order?
I'll make a comment. I'm not looking at from an industry standpoint. I think it's probably for folks like Matthew and Ian, it's probably great that it finally came to an executive order, because I feel like there's probably a lot of people on the inside being like, yes, we've been talking about this for a long, long time. It's great to see it, pinned from the highest level. So it's probably a bit of my perspective on it, but although I'm not directly impacted by the EO.
Sure. Yeah, and I can definitely respond to that. So from my perspective, I mentioned some of the hurdles that we've faced as the organization was growing, as this movement was going. And one of the ones that I brought up was, engineers wanting to do engineering things and produce feature sets, while, you have the other side of the fence, wanting to make sure that we had documentation. We wanted to make sure that we had policies around what we were doing. So if anything, it has put that focus on there and given my cyber team that much more a weight to really weigh into those discussions and to be able to get those policies created and to allow us to not only hit our MVP on what we wanted to do for our assess packages, but for our environments as well, and just really move those scans forward. There are a number of items that I do within my environments that are, checking the box, but then also doing the actual risk assessment. And I think it was Bill, you mentioned earlier, there's a difference between compliance and risk. And I think that's really where we want to focus is how can we actually identify what the risk is for the environment rather than go through a box checking drill.
Okay, great. Anyone else? All right, so another question. How are the ever-changing CMMC compliance guidelines affecting your strategies in the coming year? So are they? Do you have any plans for that? What can you share with us?
I would say that the CMMC compliance, it's nothing that is really new, so to speak. It's just different terminology applied to the similar processes that we've been really pushing forward. So I don't think it's affecting our strategies per se. It's just causing me to answer emails in a different way using different terminology.
All right, there you go. Ian or Bill, do you feel similarly, or any comments on that before we move on?
Not much for myself.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you all for answering those questions. Let's pop up our fourth and final poll question. This is less of a question and more just wanting to know how you'd like to receive your CPE credit if you attended this session. So please give that an answer. And thank you to our audience for all of their great questions that help spark such excellent conversation. So before we close out, though, I do want to hear from each of our panelists. What are some of your closing thoughts or key takeaways from this conversation? If you could leave our audience with one thing that they take back to their own agency or organization, what would that be? And we'll just go around robin again, starting with Ian, please.
Yes, the biggest thing, whether it's security, compliance, the development, whatever you're trying to get into, whatever you're trying to improve, that, big organizations, small organizations, big projects, small projects, really when you come together and you want to do things like automation or, kind of bake in the security, improve the software development lifecycle, really sit down with the team and ask the questions of, what is the things that we want to do? And what are the things that, we really need to do? Your team may say, well, we want faster builds, but if your builds are, only taking 1 to 2 minutes, that might be fine. But, if the pain point is, well, after our builds go out, security is always kicking it back to us, or the compliance people are always angry with us. That's the need. Let's bring the security people or compliance people in and figure out, how can we make that pain point better? And you'll find a lot of times that, what the team wants to do, depending on who you're talking to, is a lot different than what the team or project really needs in the immediate future. So, as you do these changes, implement these new ideas, to really sit down with the whole team and find out, those two things, what they want versus, what is really needed.
Thank you, Ian. It's great to have you on these panel discussions as always. And Matthew, what would you like to leave our audience with?
I would suggest that whatever problem that you're coming up with, honestly, the main hurdles that we've had over the last 5 years has in large part been political. It's been policy, it's been some of the intangibles. And if you fall back to logic and be able to justify what you're trying to accomplish, be persistent, create your body of evidence, come to them on the rationale of that this makes the best engineering sense, and just continue to push on it. Just because something is written in policy today doesn't mean that that's the way the policy has to be for tomorrow. And what you need to do is, focus on your different change management principles and try to find the early adopters and try to find the champions that are going to help you to be able to execute and push forward. I think that's at the heart of what the innovation the process is, and that you need to maintain that level of persistence and just push with a body of evidence that it follows a logical path.
Thank you, Matthew. It's been so great having you on this panel discussion. We hope to have you again soon. And Bill, we will wrap it up with you.
Yeah, really two things. I give one word: value stream management. And the second one is going to be, in a highly regulated industries, compliance, security, and auditability is a feature and functionality of the software you build, just like testability is. So from a value stream perspective, why is security, compliance, and audit been left out? Because it was never looked as part of the value stream. It was just development operations. So start reassessing your value stream for how you deliver software, wherever you may be building it and who you're building it for and from. But then also as you're going through the value stream, oh, holy cow, just lost my train of thought there. Yes, assess for the value stream. I had my number 2. Wow, I just completely lost. But I'll stop there at the value stream since I lost that one. But yes, assess, go through the value stream. I can't go through, if anybody has a lean background, it's the same stuff. Go through, learn to see auditing is valuable, compliance is valuable, security. And also security. At the end of the day, software should be deterministic. You should know exactly what the software can and cannot do. Why security bugs and things exist is because there's the possibility it's not deterministic. You don't know what it can and can't do because of something. So as you're designing your systems and everything, make sure you design from a software engineering perspective and engineering mindset, a deterministic system. Then you could be secure. So yeah, that's what I have there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Bill. And thank you to our partners over at Red Hat. It's always such a joy to partner with them on events like this. And thank you all at home for tuning in. We hope that you'll be joining us again for our next event, which is posted there on the screen. You can go register for that one right now. It's on fostering effective DevSecOps with modern application security. So thank you all once again, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their week. Bye.